So I'm going to walk you through making a simple weather app for Windows Phone because let's face it, there's nothing more exciting than talking about weather for an hour. I'm going to touch on MVVM, which is an architectural pattern. I'm going to show how to create a fast, good UI, and I'm going to show how easy it is to consume a JSON data service. So when I binged for a free weather service, OpenWeatherMap came up, and it works perfectly for what we need. So you can just hit API at the top, and we want the JSON feed. And it's just got a whole bunch of different examples. So we want to use the forecast. So if you just copy that, then this is obviously for New York. So if you go back, you can see the format of using a city name instead. So we'll just change that. And you can see the temperature is 292, and as hot as Durban is, it's not 292. So if you go up a bit, you can see that they provide Fahrenheit and Celsius, and you can just add what type of units you want to the end. So if we just make it metric, then it makes sense. Okay, so if we go over to Visual Studio, just create a new project, standard Windows Phone template. I'll just call it Weather App 1. This will work fine on 7.1 or 8, but I'm just going to choose 8. Okay, so there's a few ways to convert this JSON into .NET objects. You can use the .NET deserializer, or what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a free library called JSON.NET. So if you just right click on references and click manage NuGet packages, then you can search for JSON.NET. And it's just this first one. And then when you hit install, it'll find all dependencies and install it for you. Okay, so that's in. Now the next thing is MVVM. So MVVM, just very quickly, stands for Model View, View Model. Model is where you have your actual data. View is what you're seeing on this page over here, so it's what the user actually interacts with. And the view model is sort of the proxy between the model and the view. So there's a few frameworks that make that pattern easier to work with. And the one that I use in pretty much every project I do, no matter how big or small, is MVVMLite. So we can install that the same way as JSON.NET. Just search for MVVMLite, and we can install the first one. Okay, so you'll notice here that it's added a view model folder. Inside there, it's got main view model, and it's got the view model locator. So the locator you don't have to worry about yet, but the main view model is where we're going to be putting all our code. So in this app, we're only going to use one view model, but what you would normally have is multiple for the different regions in your app. So if you've got a settings view, so a settings page in your app, you'll have a settings view model with all the code, and it's a good way to separate everything. So if you hit build now, it won't work. And the reason for that is that when it installs it, it's just put this in the wrong place. So we can move this resource dictionary just up a line, and then building it should work. Okay, so now basically this view is going to get all of its data from main view model. So the first thing you need to do is you need to set the whole data context of this page to that view model. If you just select the first line and come down into the properties window and click this little square box next to data context and then create data binding, then you can choose what object you want to bind as the data context. So we'll choose the locator, which was that view model locator that you saw just now. And then you can come across to main because we want to bind to the main view model. Just hit OK, and now that's set the data context. So just to show an example, I'm going to create just a fake property in this view model, and then I'm going to bind a text block over there. So I'm just going to delete the code it's put there, and now I'm going to use the snippet that MVVMLite provides to create properties really easy. So if you type MVVM, then that first one is a property, so you can just press tab and it'll open this up. So we'll just call it test string, and we'll make it a string, and its private name will be test string, and by default it'll be hello world. Okay, so just whenever you change properties and whatever in your view model, you will need to build again. Once you've built, you can come across, and let's just select this page name, and over here you can see that the data context is main view model because everything on this page currently has that data context. And the text, we can click the little box and then create data binding like you did just now, but now we can bind it to this test string. So hit OK, and it says hello world. Okay, so what we need now is we need a whole bunch of .NET classes representing this. So what you can do is there's a service called JSON to C#, and you can just copy your JSON and paste it into there, and it creates those classes for you. So let's just copy that. And now when I was explaining MVVM, I said that the M, so the model, is where you keep your actual data. So I'm going to create a folder called model. Then I'm going to add a class called weather classes. Now, you really shouldn't be piling all your classes into one, but it's just going to be a waste of time to move them out now. So I've put all these classes that it's generated into here, and you'll see that this over here, what it's called list, which has temperature and pressure and humidity, is actually a day. So just so it doesn't look confusing, I'm going to change that to day. And if you press Control dot, then you can hit enter and it will rename all the references to that to say day like below. Now this DT property over here is the date time of that day, but in epoch format. So we want to convert that to a standard .NET datetime object so it's easier to work with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create datetime object and call that time, and then I'm going to convert this to private in DT, and just a little shortcut that you can use, if you've got a private member like that, press Control R and E, and it'll bring up this window. Then you can just press OK and apply, and it'll create the public member for you. Now, every time DT gets set, which is the epoch format, we want to also set time. So just do that, and I've got a bit of code here which will do that for us. Next thing is that we need a list of days. So we'll download the forecast, and it'll be 5 days worth of data or 7 days worth, and we need somewhere to store that. So as I said, all our code goes into main view model, so we're going to put that list in here. So just delete that test string. We're going to create another property, and this property is going to be called daylist. Now, we're going to make it an observable collection, which is pretty much a normal list or collection or array or whatever, but it's got some handy things for binding. So it's an observable collection of type day, and the private name will be daylist, and by default it'll be null. So these little red squigglies means that it doesn't know what you're talking about. So if you just select there and press Control dot, then it'll do nothing. Sorry. Press Enter to accept that, and then you can press Control dot and add that namespace, and on day as well, Control dot and add that namespace. Okay, so now that we have that property, let's just create some fake data for that. So by default, it's added in code here that tells us this will run in blend and this will run for realsies. So where it says it'll run in blend, although we're not using blend, what that means is that when we in this UI here, so when we're creating it in Visual Studio, it'll run this code here. But then when we run it in an emulator or on a phone, this will run. So at the top, we're going to put our fake data, and below, we're going to put the actual code which will download the feed and display the real data. So over here, I'm just going to say daylist is equal to new observable collection of type day. Then I'm going to say daylist.add. I'm going to create a new item, and that day I'm just going to say that the temperature is 20 degrees and the time is date time. You can see those red squigglies, so just press Control dot and then enter to add the namespace. It's date time dot now. Okay, if we copy that, but now, so if this is Saturday, then we want this one to be Sunday. So if you just hit dot and then add days, we can add 1 day to that. And let's add a few more days. Then we'll make that 2, 3, 4. So if that's Saturday, then this is Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Okay. So let's build that so the changes go across. Come back into main page, and you can pretty much delete all of this code, all of the SAML that's already here. You can just leave these rows intact over there. Now we want to put a list across the top of the different days so the user can select what day and tap it. So if you just create a new list box and set the item source to the property we created. So the item source is where it gets its items. So if you just come down to item source, click the little dot, create data binding, and then choose day list, then you'll see that there are these days. Now, those are these fake days that we've created over here. Okay, so at the moment it's just representing what that object would be .toString. So we need to define a custom template for that so that it knows how to display each item. So if you just go into the document outline on the side, then you'll see list box over here, and you can right click on that and it'll allow you to override different templates. What you can also do is right click on the list box in the main view over here, and it'll bring up the same menus, but once you've got a whole bunch of elements, it's much easier to know what you're clicking on from the outliner or the document outline. So you can right click, edit additional template, and we want to change the item template. So you can just click create empty. You can select list box, so it creates the template on the actual list box. And let's just call it day template and hit OK. Okay, so it's now put this grid, and it's basically going to create a grid for every item. Just to demonstrate that, set the background to red. And you can see there's a whole bunch of different items. So we can delete all that. Just give it a bit of a margin. And then let's put a text block which will display what day it is. So if you just click on the text block, come across here to text, and then click create data binding. Now it knows that it's already in the context of a single day. So you can come down and you can see time, but that'll just do the datetime.toString. So if you open that up, you'll find this property called day of week. Now it's quite strange, but day of week gives you the day of the week. So if you click that and press OK, then you see it's getting Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, which is great. But they're going downwards instead of horizontally. So if you just come to the outliner, and currently you can see we in that item template, so you can hit this little arrow upwards to return to the scope of the main UI. Now if you right click on list box, edit additional template, and edit the items panel, then you can create a template for the items panel. What that is it's the panel that it puts around all the items. So with that we can affect the orientation of the flow. So same thing, we can choose to create it on the list box, and we can just leave the default name. So currently it's got a default stack panel. I'm going to make two changes. First, I'm going to change that to a virtualizing stack panel, which is sort of like a stack panel, except that it's got some UI virtualization techniques which make it kill items as they go off screen, which saves RAM and helps you with performance. And then also I'm going to set the orientation of that to horizontal. Okay, so once I've done that, just hit this up button and we'll come back to this scope and then just build to make sure you're seeing the latest changes. And now they're flowing across. So let's just create a little rectangle, height 3, fill black or anything. The vertical alignment we want to be bottom, so vertical alignment obviously just tells it where it should be aligned vertically, and then horizontal alignment will just set on stretch, so it'll stretch to the full width of that container. Now we can make this any color over here, but I want to make it the accent color of the phone. An easy way to do that is, once you've got it selected, just click the down arrow to open up brush, and then if you're on the solid color here, you can click color resources, and it's got a whole bunch of resources for you. The first one happens to be phone accent color. Okay, so now we need to display the currently selected day in the bottom over here. So if Sunday is selected and Sunday has a temperature of 20, we want to display a big 20 down below here. So we need to create a property in the main view model which will be called current day or selected day or whatever you want. So if we go over to main view model, just add a few lines, we'll add a property, same way we did before, MVVM, press tab, and now let's just call this current day. So now this won't be a list of days, this will just be a single day, and it'll be the day they've got selected. Press tab to go across, and private name will be called current day. By default, it'll be null. Okay, so in this mock data that we've created here, at the end of that, let's just make sure we also set current day. So we'll just make current day equal to the first item of the day list, which isn't important, it just means that it has a value. So the first item of day list will be that one there. Okay, so after adding the property, if I hit build, then come across here. Now what we need to do is we need to tell the list box that it needs to look over here to see which item is selected. And when you select an item in the list box, it needs to change this current day property in the view model. You can do that by selecting the list box here, scrolling down until you see selected item, and binding that to that property. So if you go to selected item, hit the box, create data binding, then you see there's a property here called current day. So if you just hit OK, you'll notice that Sunday has gone red. And now the default template for what happens to text blocks in a list box when they're selected is that it changes to the accent color. So we know that Sunday is being selected. Just to, sorry, I keep on bringing these windows out. Just to show you another example, if I made this 3, so it's 0, 1, 2, 3, then it'll be this item here that's going to be selected. So if I come across to main page and I build that again, then you can see Wednesday is now selected. So it's looking a bit cramped, so if we just go to that text block and add some margin of 5, it's looking better and it's further away from the line. Okay, so now whichever day is selected, we want to take the temperature and we want to put it big at the bottom over here. So if we just scroll down, and we can add a few spaces over here. Now we'll add another grid over here. So currently we're in a main grid called layout root. The first row is auto height, which means that it'll just expand to whatever content it has inside it. And the next row is star, which means all the remaining space of that grid it'll take up. So currently this list box is sitting in row 1, which has the index of 0. And then we're going to put this grid to take up the remaining space. So let's just create grid, and we'll set grid.row is equal to 1. Okay, now the reason I've created this grid is that I want to set the data context of this grid to be the current day, and then all the items inside will automatically have a data context of this grid. So if we just select the grid, go to data context and create the data binding, we can select current day. So now everything within this grid automatically has this data context. So let's just put a text block, and we'll change the text to be the current temperature, which is temp. Okay, and you can see there's a little 20 over there. So we can just make that bigger, go to the document outline, right click on the text block, and go down to edit style and apply resource. So there's a whole bunch of different ones here. I'm just going to choose the phone text huge style. Now if I come back, you can see there's a 20 there. So we can center that by saying horizontal alignment is center and vertical alignment is center. Okay, now what would also be great is if there were little degrees symbol. So if you just open up the character map, you can find the degree over there, select and copy. Now if you select text block, you scroll down and go back to that binding you created earlier, there are actually more settings in here. And what you can do is this string format, it's got a whole bunch of different default formats. Now we can just select any of them. So let's say that one. And we can just change that to just be 0:0. And what that'll do is it'll just display a whole number. So if the temperature is coming through as 20.1234, it'll just display 20. Now we also want to display the degrees after then. So if you just click paste, it'll put that little degree symbol in there. And you can hit OK. Now there's the degrees there. Okay, so now we've got our fake data and it's displaying decently. So let's get this real data in, and then we can test it in the emulator. So if you come back to main view model, over here in the else, which is the code that runs on the emulator or on an actual device, you can just create a new web client. You'll see there's red squigglies, so just press Control dot, hit enter, just create a new instance of web client, and we're going to use it to download the string, which will be that. So we can just say client dot download string completed, and now this is going to be the event handler that runs once it's finished downloading that string. So when that's selected, you can press plus and equals. At this point, you could press tab twice to create the event handler. I'm just going to show you that. That creates this. Or what you can do, which is a bit neater, is create a lambda expression. So you can just go plus equal, open brackets, and it's got two properties that come in, and then you do that. So it's got two properties that come in. It's got an equal sign, greater than sign, curly braces, and a semicolon at the end. So all the code over here will run once it's finished downloading that string. So we can just go client.download string async. It needs a URI. So I'll just give it a blank URI, come across to your browser and copy this URL and paste it in there. Okay, so it's going to create a new instance. It's then going to download the string, and then it's going to come into here. So we need to check whether there was an error or not. If you check e.error and make sure it's null, but if it isn't null, then you need to display some sort of error or whatever. So I'm just going to show a little error. And displaying a message box, depending on who you talk to, does break the rules of MVVM, because you're meant to be separating out your view from your code. So you shouldn't be displaying your error here, but it's just a quick, easy way to show you. Okay, now, so if there wasn't an error, we want to now display that data. If you look across in your weather classes, you can see that the main object that comes back is called root object. So we want to create a root object. Let's call it result is equal to JSON convert. You'll see red squigglies. So we can just hit Control dot again and add the using statement for nuisancesoft.json. Now we want to deserialize this object, and we can tell it that it's of type root object. It needs a string, which is the JSON, which happens to be e.result. So that's the result of that download string that the web client did. And then if you look in result, you'll see that this list over here, which is a list of days, is actually what we want. So we can just set this day list is equal to results.list, which will give us an error. So now the reason why it's an error is that this is an observable collection, and this is a generic list. A great way to convert a generic list into an observable collection is just to say new observable collection of type day, and then it takes a single parameter of a list, and it'll convert that for you. Okay, so once we've set that, we also want to set the current day, so the selected day, to just be the first item that it got back. So we can make that equal to daylist 0, just like we did before. Okay, so let's build this. Once it's built, we should be able to run it in the emulator. Okay, and it comes through, and we can see Sunday is selected, and it's going to be 21 degrees. If we select Monday, it's also 21. Tuesday is also 21. And Wednesday is also 21. So unless you've got a very predictable weather cycle, you can see that what we're clicking here isn't affecting that current day object in the background. And I'll show you the reason for that. So if you go back into the binding for the selected item, and you click on more settings, you'll see that it's got this binding direction. You need to change that to two-way. What this means is that it'll react to changes in the code. So it'll react to changes in that property that it's bound to, and it will change the property in the background when it is selected. So you can hit OK, and we can run that again. So now Sunday is 20 degrees, Monday is 22, Tuesday is 23, and Wednesday is 23. Okay, so if you try to scroll across, this isn't going to work. So the reason for that is that we need to just type two little properties over here. So if you type in scroll viewer dot vertical scroll bar visibility, change that to disabled, and scroll viewer dot horizontal scroll bar visibility, and just set that on auto. So now those we put on this list box. Can run it again. And let's try that again. Okay, and now you can see I can scroll backwards and forwards. Okay, so everyone loves Archons. So let's put little Archons in. There's a program called Metro Studio, which is very cool because it's just got hundreds of icons that you can customize. So if you want weather, you can type that in, and there's a whole bunch of weather icons. So I've gone ahead and saved a few of those out. So if we just right click on the project, add new folder, just call that Archons, add existing item, and I'll just add these in. So the way these are named is 0, 1, and they go down to 50. And that's just how OpenWeatherMap has decided to name the different weather states. Now the data that comes back, it will have a D or an N in. D means day, and N means night. I'm going to strip out that D and N because I'm just going to display one icon for both day and night. So if we go across to here in weather, you can see that the icon is set over there. So icon is just going to be a string that comes back, and that'll be 01D, for example, or 04N. So I just want to create another property in this day object, which will give us the path to the right PNG. So we don't need a private variable, we'll just have a public one, and we'll make it a string and call that icon URL. I guess icon path would be better. And we can only give it a get, we don't need a set. And when this is requested, we can just return weather, and you'll notice that weather is a list. Now, open weather map gives you a list of states throughout the day, but in this forecast, there's only going to be one per day, because it's just an average of the whole day. So we can just return the first item, and we want the Archon string out of there. So now, as I said, we want to strip out the D and the N, plus we want to add this Archons folder there. So if we just go to the beginning, we can have /archons/ and then we'll have 0, 1, but we want to strip out the D and N, so we'll say .replace, and we'll replace the D with blank, and we'll do a replace again on the N with blank. And then finally, we want to add .png to the end of that. So let's just build. Then you can come across to main page. And now I'm going to create more rows in this bottom grid so that the Archon sits up top and this text sits in the bottom. So you can just go grid.row definitions. The first row, we can just not define the height, and the same with the second. So what this is going to do is it's just basically going to make the heights auto on both. So both are going to stretch to as much as they can, and when there's multiple rows doing that, they'll just evenly space themselves out. So you can see this first row is the same height as the second row. We want this text to be in grid.row1, and then we want to create an image which is in the first row. Now, you don't have to explicitly define that it's in the first row or the row at index 0, but if you want to make it clearer to yourself when you read the code, then you can put it in. So if you come across to the properties window, when you've got that image selected, you can see this property called source. So you can just hit the little square box and create data binding, and now you can bind it to Archon path, which is that property we created, and hit OK. That isn't going to have any effect over here yet because we haven't created fake data for that. So if we come here, we just want to create a new weather list. So it'll be a list of weather, and we'll just create one item inside there, which will be new weather object. And we'll just set that Archon to, for example, 01D. Okay, so now if you build that and come across to main page, and then, sorry, let's just set that current day back to 0 and build it again. Sundays should be selected, and there's our Archon. So now that looks great, but we can also add a smaller Archon above each of these days. So if you just go into the document outliner, find this list box, and go down to edit additional templates, item template, and edit current, because we've already overridden it. So edit current will take us here to our code we had earlier. Now in this grid, we can just add 2 rows. the first row, we can give a height of auto, and the next row we can just take up whatever other space there is. So we'll put the text block and the rectangle into the bottom row. And then we'll create an image in the first row, which we'll set the source to that icon path. Okay, so it's very big. So you can just set a property called stretch, and we can set that on uniform, and then set the width to 50, for example. That's a bit small, so we'll just make it 70, but now there's a lot of white space around it. So let's just give it a margin, and on the left we'll say -15, and the top we can say -20, the right we can say -15, and the bottom maybe -10. Okay, let's add some more to the bottom, so it's -20, and that looks good. So in the document outline, we'll set our scope back by clicking the little up arrow. Okay, you'll notice that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, etc. doesn't have icons. The reason for that is that we haven't added this fake code, and you can just copy paste and then it will be there. So if we just run this to test it, and you see each day has a different icon for the weather on that day. And then when you click each of them, both the icon changes and the temperature. Okay, so the final thing, just to give it some color, is I'm going to put a rectangle in the background and make that rectangle change according to the temperature. So we'll just put it in this current day grid, and we'll make it a rectangle, and we want it to go over both the rows. So you can just say grid.rowspan is 2. If you select the rectangle and come across to the brush in the properties window, and then go to gradient brush, then you can set it to a gradient. So the black at the top, we can just make transparent. And now this color on the right affects the bottom. So for now we can just make that anything, because we're going to change that from the code. Okay, so if you look in the XAML, you'll see that this gradient stop has that color there. We want to bind this color property to a property in current day. So let's go across to the weather classes, and this class here, which is day, we want to create a new color property in here. So just go public color, and you'll see that there's red squigglies. You can press Control dot, and there's 3 different namespaces where there's something called color. In this instance, we want to use system.windows.media. So you can just press enter, and we'll call this temp color. Just give it a getter. Okay, so we want to return a color from ARGB. What that means is that we want to create a new color from alpha, red, green, and blue values. So you'll see it takes 4 bytes. So if we go 255, which will make it fully transparent, 255, which will make it fully red, 255 fully green, and 255 fully blue, and we build that, then you can come across and you can bind this value here, and this bottom gradient stop will become white. So with that gradient stop selected, come over here to color, select the little black square, create data binding, and just bind it to temp color. Okay, and you see it's gone white at the bottom. So let's just go back to this property, and we'll change it to be affected by the temperature. Now, this is just to show you a quick example. The code I'm going to write here is bad, and it will crash if the temperature goes above a certain amount, but it's just to demonstrate having a dynamic color property. So for the red, we can make it add more red depending on how hot the temperature is. So we'll go 255 times the temperature value divided by whatever our max value is going to be. So this is why it'll crash when it goes over that max value. But let's just say that our max temperature is going to be 30. So it's going to be 255 times temperature divided by 30. But then we need to just convert that whole thing to bytes. Okay, then the green, we can just change to 0. We don't need any green. And then the blue will be pretty much the same as we have for red, except the opposite way around. So the colder it is, the more blue it has. And you can do that just adding in another bracket, going 255 minus that whole amount. Okay, so let's just build that. If you come across to main page.xaml, it's got a purpley color, and we can just run it to test it out. Okay, so 21 degrees, sort of between blue and red. As it went to 23, it got a bit more red. That's the same. That's the same. 24, it got more red. 25, it got more red. And unfortunately, there isn't a cold day to show it getting bluer. So I hope you've learned something. I'll post the source code along with the video on my blog. And if there's any questions, just ask in the comments or on Twitter or via Mindwaves. Thank you.